Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's special event, From Surviving to Thriving, PMAD Journeys of Resilience. I apologize for a few of our technical glitches prior to this evening's event. I'm glad that everybody got our new Zoom link and just wanted to let everybody know who's here with us that tonight's event will be recorded and it will be available on our YouTube page next week. My name is Paige Bellenbaum, and I'm the founding director and chief external relations officer here at the Motherhood Center. And tonight, as you can see, I am joined by 5 spectacular women who will bravely be sharing their PMAD stories with all of you and how they came out on the other side. For those of you who are learning about the Motherhood Center for the first time, we are a clinical treatment facility for new and expecting mothers and birthing people experiencing maternal mental health conditions. We offer support groups, therapy, medication management, and a one-of-a-kind perinatal partial hospital program or day program. We provide support and clinical care to pregnant and postpartum people in New York and New Jersey. Tonight's event is our signature event in honor of Maternal Mental Health Awareness Month. So much is happening in the space of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders right now, from innovative prevention and early intervention programs to more frequent screening for perinatal depression, and most recently, the release of the National Strategy to Improve Maternal Mental Health Care created by the U.S. Task Force on Maternal Mental Health. So there's so much going on. This most recent comprehensive U.S. strategy lays out 5 pillars. Number 1, build a national infrastructure that prioritizes perinatal mental health and well-being. Number 2, make care and services available, accessible, and affordable. Number 3, use data and research to improve outcomes and accountability. Number 4, promote prevention and engage, educate, and partner with communities. And number 5, lift up lived experience. And tonight, we are here to lift up the lived experience. We will hear from these brave, vulnerable, and honest women that each experienced a maternal mental health condition. These women all attended the day program at different times and went on to use their own lived experience to make a difference. It is my proud honor to introduce to you Stephanie Wu, PMHC, Stella Faulkner, Jessica Vanderberg, LCSW, Tanaya Britton, and Janelle Jones. Thank you all for being here tonight and for the work you do to support other mothers. I'm going to go ahead and dive right in with the first question. And whoever wants to take a stab at answering this first one. When you think back to before you even became pregnant, what were your expectations of motherhood? And what did you think it was going to be like?
I honestly thought it was just going to be roses and flowers and rainbows and just a perfect little life, like no issues. Everything was just going to be nice and calm. It was like a fairy tale. Like, I'm going to have the baby, all the presents are going to be at the home, the nursery is going to be set up. Yeah, I'm going to be nice and stable. I'm going to be in a stable position. That's what I always think of. Like, that's what I thought it would have been like.
Yeah, I didn't think my life was going to change much and was very focused on, as Janelle was saying, planning the nursery, having that party to celebrate, because it took us a long time. We spent 2.5 years trying to get pregnant through IVF. So it was a long journey. So once I got pregnant, it was just like, awesome, that's it. This is going to be great. And obviously it was very different.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be as hard as it was. I think I thought more about how it was going to fit into my work schedule, to be honest.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad when I think about it now that I thought more about how it was going to impact my career, my job, and how I was going to juggle it and work it in. And I think part of me thought like, oh, like I'll just wear him to a Zoom meeting or something, But yeah, I mean, babies don't care about your calendar, so that part was pretty stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who can blame us, right? It's not like anybody gave us a rule book on what it's actually going to be like, right? And I think you all shared and spoke to what most, if not all, women and birthing people's preconceived notion of having a baby is like, right? We have it portrayed in this very specific way that kind of sets us up with this very specific and high expectations. And it very rarely ever turns out that way. Which brings me to my next question. Did you even know what PMADs were before you got pregnant or had a baby? Had you ever heard of any of the perinatal mood and anxiety disorders?
I did. So I think, you know, in hindsight, I definitely understood postpartum depression, or I knew what to look for regarding depression. I think what surprised me is the range and variables that can show up. I didn't ever think that anxiety would be a part of that conversation. I did not ever think OCD could be a part of that conversation. I didn't, you know, I think there was this exception that there was anticipated anxiety. Like, it was supposed to be anxious. We were supposed to be like precise. We were supposed to be having these like sort of really hard, challenging thoughts. But that took me by surprise. And for me, I experienced what I experienced after the birth of my third baby. And so I think the other surprise there is that it can happen to you at any point in your reproductive life. It can happen to you if you have no remarkable history of mental health. And it can really, you know, you're not really protected, even if you are really educated, honestly.
Yeah, I had only heard of postpartum depression. I don't think I'd ever actually heard of postpartum anxiety. To what Jessica said, I think I just thought everyone is anxious, so it's like normal. And I think it's really hard to know the different levels of a PMAD. I mean, I never heard the term PMAD before, I think, until I like went to the Motherhood Center. But yeah, I mean, there's really not much information or education on it. I don't think my OB ever mentioned it. I feel like somewhere along the line of the 100 appointments we had to go to, like, someone should have probably mentioned a PMAD to me at some point. And I think the issue is that because we all think the anxiety and slight depression is normal, that we just, you know, we don't think to get help. Like, that's the problem, right? I mean, I've spoken to so many moms now who are like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I had like low level depression or low level anxiety or something, but you know, it's normal. And so I didn't want to pay to get help. You'll pass or something like that, right? So, but for some people it's really extreme, and you know, we need to change that mentality.
I think I had heard of postpartum depression, but it wasn't top of mind. I think I was so focused on the birthing process, taking birthing classes, taking lactation classes, taking all the things to focus on the baby and like preparing the nursery and all of those things and the joy of being pregnant. And it was a healthy pregnancy. There was no focus on me and my well-being. I remember giving birth to my daughter and being completely sleep deprived, awakened every few hours during the night when I was there. And 3 days later, you know, a social worker coming in and glossing over the term baby blues. And that was about it. And then there was no other information or mention of, you know, the signs and symptoms of a PMAD. And yet, you know, same here as Stella mentioned, when I got to the Motherhood Center, it's the first time I heard that acronym.
Did any of you get screened?
The first time I got screened was right after birth. You know, I'm surprised that I never got, I don't think I got screened during pregnancy at all. And actually now in hindsight, I remember that when I got screened right before discharge after my son was born, the nurse actually like sort of questioned my Edinburgh response. It's the survey that they administer, and the last question is about whether you ever have thoughts of harming yourself. And I remember at the time, and this was like May 2020 COVID, where you're just like, you know, I like need to get out of the hospital. Like, and I put like hardly ever, you know, thinking like that's not going to flag. And then the nurse came back and said, I don't remember exactly, but something along the lines of like, you know, you put hardly ever. I just, you know, kind of like want to make sure, you know, because then I'm going to have to call in social work or something. And so I don't know, at the time, I sort of, I just like, I changed it. I just changed it back. I changed it to not at all. Just to like either make her life easier, make my life easier. I don't know. And she didn't even question it. She just took it back and that was it.
Yeah, I think there was something I filled out, but nothing as thorough as what I had to fill out the Motherhood Center, to be honest. Um, and yeah, like the social work, I would be scared of that. You know, like I didn't even know what a LCSW really was until TMC. And I just hear social worker and I think, oh, these people are going to come and take your children away.
Yes,
Um,
definitely.
so like I didn't know like they were actually therapists. So I'm sure even if I was feeling something, I probably would have lied and said I'm great.
We hear
So
this.
I actually, I'm sorry, Paige. I took it with my first, I believe, when I was in the OBGYN office, but with my first, I didn't have it. I know I didn't have it until I gave birth, like 3 months in. Then with my second, because I already knew that I thought I had it the first time, they did screen me for a PMAD during my pregnancy. So I was in therapy, but it wasn't, I was in therapy, but it wasn't like the Motherhood Center. I'll put it like that. And then when I was at the doctor's office for Ava, like at one of the appointments, the doctor also screened. And she was like, I answered truthfully because I know how the scores are. Like I know how to make it so that you don't flag. And so I answered it truthfully, and she was like, "Oh, so are you speaking with someone? Do you have a therapist? Do you have like?" She was actually concerned, and she was like wanting to provide information if needed. So
So interesting, such a full range of responses, right? Of like somebody wasn't screened at all, somebody was screened and kind of alluded to the fact that something might need to happen unless they maybe change their answer, somebody who was screened and taken seriously, which really speaks to like limited to no consistency around screening requirements and recommendations across the perinatal period. And I think to many of your points, you know, even when we are screened, there's that fear of if I answer these questions correctly, what if they take my baby away? Or what if they think I'm crazy? Or, you know, I'm just going to keep it inside because I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I tell someone how I'm really feeling. How did you all know something was wrong or off during your pregnancy or postpartum? And what kind of symptoms originated for you that let you know that you weren't doing okay?
I didn't know what was going on. I had postpartum psychosis. And I remember everything I did, it was overwhelming. I remember my husband opening the bathroom door and I couldn't figure out how to brush my teeth and then brush my hair. And he'd be like, what is going on in here? And I started obviously spiraling the moment I left the hospital, probably even before then. So I was not fully aware. It was my husband, thank God, who intervened. But the signs were I thought I was writing chapter books in my head. I was very paranoid. I thought when we installed the Nanit, we were on a reality show, and I thought everything was being filmed. Um, and I wasn't able to sleep. And thank God my husband took me to the hospital, which was a horrible experience. I don't recommend that for anyone, but it was the only option. I thought I was being pushed out of the apartment window. So I'm very lucky that I'm here tonight.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
I think for me, you know, as I had mentioned, that I'd had these, you know, sort of unremarkable postpartum experiences before my third was born, that I was really fortunate to know almost immediately that something wasn't right. And so I sought help, what I thought was immediately. But in hindsight, you know, there were so many barriers to getting help, and so much of my symptoms was like leading to paralysis that like it went on a lot longer than it probably needed to, actually. And while I was not diagnosed with psychosis, the things I've been able to uncover years and years later, even, I don't even think I was truthful when I showed up to you guys, to the Motherhood Center. And um, Miles was born. It was a really traumatic birth, which I now know is often a trigger for these experiences. But he was born unassisted and unplanned in my bathtub in under 20 minutes. It was, I was pretty much catatonic for the next 24 hours, I think. That, combined with just also being a mother to two older kids at the time, they were 5 and 2. And just the healing from something like that is not pleasant. There's a reason it's called labor. It's supposed to take a long time. It shouldn't happen fast. But I think that I remember a really specific trigger when he was born in 2017. And that summer, there was a big expose in New York Magazine about the state of climate change. And it just triggered this deep climate anxiety. And that was, 7 years ago at this point. And so we didn't have a ton of language or conversation really happening about the reality of climate change that we do now. And I think it felt so bleak. And I remember simultaneously, like in a very paranoid way, like holding myself in a room, not letting people touch me or the baby, really restless, hypervigilant, extremely untrusting, very emotionally turbulent, like this deep sense of injustice that I had just birthed these people and I was just dooming them somehow. And I was just like an open wire, just a live wire, really. And those things were just so not me. And it was the rage, I think, that actually just sort of set me over. I felt like I'd grown this organ, like it was like this organ made of anger. And that with some time blindness and some kind of paralysis around like being able to make decisions was a real wake up call. But it was my son who slipped this note under my bedroom door. And I actually keep it with me really close at all times and have it here. And was 5 at the time, and he wrote me this note, and it said, "Dear Mom, I'm so sorry you're feeling sad all the time." And then there's a little line down the center, and it says, "Dear Dad, I know you have so much work to do, and I want you to know I can help you." And it was, I don't think I understood the impact that my absence really was having on them. And I knew that couldn't stand. And so that was a big change, a big wake up call. And I think through the help of my midwives, they really kind of warm handed off to what was newly opened at the time in 2017, the Motherhood Center.
Jessica, I will never forget that note. Right when you mentioned that, I remember it word for word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessica, I had that rage too. I felt like angry. I was anxious. I had that impending doom of something bad happening. I felt like at some point when I'm walking up or down the stairs, I'll drop the baby. And then I also had the intrusive thoughts, which I didn't know was common, you know? So I'm thinking like, oh my God, what if something bad happens to the baby? Like I thought it was impending doom that I was really having, but I realized now is intrusive thoughts. And I was also having suicidal ideations. So not that I wanted to do anything, but I was having the thoughts of wanting to end it all, right? And then I also remember being on the couch just watching Netflix. Like I watched probably all of the and this is after 2020. So, you know, during 2020, we all were watching Netflix. This was 2022. Like we're back into life. and I'm watching all the Netflix shows. Like I remember watching Wednesday and watching it like from the beginning to the end in one day. And I remember my boyfriend saying, Janelle, I think something's happening. I think, and it was then that I was like, okay, maybe I need to I need to find more help, better help. So,
Yeah. So I didn't technically have a PMAD. Mine was more like other trauma compounded with, like, I think being a new mom. And I knew something was wrong. I mean, I was actively planning my suicide. But I did not, I tried calling the national hotline, suicide line, and a couple other numbers, but they were all just terrible experiences that I just hung up or ended the chat. I wish there was something better out there to connect with, because it just really turned me off, those outlets. I asked them, like, what would happen if, like, I answered a certain question wrong or something, and they said they would call the police. And I'm just picturing like police coming to my door and all my neighbors seeing something or something. So, I turned that off. But I did not think to get help. Someone that I know noticed something and they got me help. But I proactively was not getting myself help. I thought I was doing my son a favor. But yeah.
Well, you tried, Stella, to get help, right? But it just was a horrible experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's trying, but I didn't actively try harder, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say, and I want to hear from others who haven't had a chance to share, is like, as we're all hearing from your stories, when we're in that place, right? I always liken it to, and this was certainly my experience, and it's why we have the life preserver as our logo. When you are experiencing such a severity of PMAD symptoms, you are drowning in an ocean and you are paddling as fast as you can just to breathe and keep your head above water. And this expectation that women and birthing people in this most vulnerable, hopeless and hopeless state are able to pick up the phone and start calling around to see who accepts their insurance, or even explain what's going on when we ourselves don't know what's happening because nobody told us about what these illnesses look like or what a PMAD is. Right. And then we still end up feeling as though maybe we didn't do enough. We should have tried harder. Right. And how hard it is to even put one step in front of the other. And also just this common theme, and I still want to hear from others, but like how for most of you, it wasn't you who got yourself the help. How could you? It was somebody in your life, your partner, a loved one who noticed that you were really struggling, that was able to connect the dots, right? It's impossible when we're in this place to know what to do or how to help ourselves.
I sort of had the opposite with the partner or like somebody else, kind of like red flagging. I mean, for one, I became a mother during the pandemic. So, I think it was just like such a hard time to become a mother. And that's not the time that I got the really, really bad depression, which I got this time around with my second. But I did have a little bit at the time. But like when I had my second and it was several months in, I thought, okay, I'm doing a lot better than I was with them than with my first kid. I wasn't as tearful those first few months, but then, kind of once I started weaning, breastfeeding, going back to work, and I had a lot of insomnia, it all just kind of like just sort of spiraled, and I just couldn't stop crying. I was just crying all the time, and I just thought I was burned out. And I think so did my husband. Like we thought it was like, this is what you've signed up for. Like this just is, But then I'd ask like other moms, and it just like it didn't seem like a lot of other moms were having the same kind of like, I'd be like, oh, don't you cry a lot? And they're like, no, not that much. And I was like, everybody else, like, see, other people seem to be having an easier time than me. So that was hard because it took me a while. It just made me think like maybe I'm just not like maybe I'm a little more weak or something, like as a mother, and maybe I'm just handling it more poorly than other women do.
Stephanie, to that point of you saying maybe I'm just weak or maybe I'm not able to handle it. I remember being discharged from being an inpatient in a psych ward and coming home and being devastated by the experience and thinking my child doesn't deserve me. My husband, I'm a defective partner to him. And I actually started spiraling from there. And it took a really, really long time, that experience of being hospitalized, to build back my confidence and believe that I was a capable mom and deserved to be my daughter's mother.
It can be so hard, and I'm hopeful that this is changing, and it's events like tonight that invite this type of change. When you talk about, Stephanie, I talk to people, I let them know how I was feeling, and like everybody else seemed to be enjoying it, loving it, feeling blissed out that they had this baby. Like nobody was really talking about it. And I think that so speaks to just the shame and stigma that we still have that surrounds mental health, period, but in particular, maternal mental health. And how, it's interesting, anytime I go and give a talk in a room, with 10 people, it's always 20% or more, or, of the women who show up smiling, happy. And then by the time I finish telling them about PMADs, there's a line out the door of people who are crying saying, that's me. That happened to me. I didn't know that other people go through that too. And how hard it is to find community, and other people with the same or a similar lived experience, which brings me to my next question. Since all of you were in the day program here at the Motherhood Center, what was it like to be here? And please, you can feel free to say, when I first got there, I wanted to run in the opposite direction because most people do.
Yeah.
But what was it like?
Like a hammock for me. I showed up and I was just like, I felt like for the first time, like I could, like other people could carry me, you know? And I never wanted to leave. Like I was like, I just was like, I just want to stay here like forever and never go
I
home.
I was I was actually there when Stephanie joined, and I remember when she joined, and she was just like so cheery, so positive, like so happy. And I remember just thinking like, what is this person doing here? Like, does she know like what this place is? And then she starts talking, and then it like all comes out, and I just remember thinking like, you really just don't know. If I had met Stephanie out at a bar or whatever, like I never ever would have known or guessed what she was actually going through. I mean, like the first 10 minutes we're at the mothers at a day program, I thought like this girl does not belong here. Like she, it looks like she wants to go jump roping or something. Like, but yeah, it was really, really eye-opening for me. Um, but for me personally, I hated being there the first week, the first day. I mean, I wanted to leave. Um, Mainly because like I never spent so much time with that many women in my life. Also, I didn't have a PMAD, I was like past that stage. Um, and that first week I was there, all the discussion was around, it was like PMAD week. And I was like, what am I doing here? This doesn't make any sense. Like these women don't understand me. They don't get why I'm here, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, maybe it's like the universe or whatever, but the person I ended up sitting next to on my first day, I ended up sitting next to her almost every single day until she discharged. And she took me aside that first week, maybe in the first day. And she was like, I understand why you're here. And like, I feel the same way as you. And I'm so glad that you're here and you said what you did of like why you're really here, because I have not had the courage to talk about that other stuff. Um, and so like, I hope you stay. And I stayed. I came in every day to see her and sit next to her. And when she discharged, I let her know that. So, but yeah, at the end of it, I'm still friends with a lot of the people there, including Stephanie. So
I think my experience is somewhere in between both of those. And I had this, like, I remember walking in the first day and there was like a lot of resistance, and just a fear, just didn't know what to expect, I think. And I knew it also was a new organization. And so I think I was also, a little fearful of being a guinea pig, if you will, having kind of that be part of that internal monologue. But I like have this very distinct memory of like walking in the room and being like, I don't belong here. And then that morphed into like a discussion with myself about what I deserved. Like, do I even deserve this time? Like, do I even deserve to take like a step back from my family, my 3 kids under 5, and my husband who is like solo parenting now. It felt very frivolous in a lot of ways, and I really struggled with that until I sat down. Similarly, Stella, I sat down next to 2 women actually who I felt like once I kind of like settled into those chairs, that I was like being hugged. I just felt like just so comforted by the 2 people around me. So much so they're still very, very good friends. We have matching tattoos. And and I think that piece though about the like that thought I kept having about deserving it was both like partially that I didn't think things were that bad, but also that like I didn't deserve it, and it very quickly became clear, kind of the way you're talking about with Stephanie, Stella, that like and Paige, you kind of mentioned this too, is like I didn't even know I had a mask on until like we just started like taking them off, and I was like, holy, swear that is what there's so much underneath this that I had no idea. And like to feel so connected to so many people that that I didn't know immediately in that shared space was just kind of miraculous, actually. I felt like it was a magic trick. And so, but I think also, and I'm curious to see where you guys landed in this journey, but like there was like a deep sense of injustice that also showed up for me too, where I was like, why do we require critical care to end up in care? Like, why isn't this just a conversation we're having, all the time? I'm not doing anybody any service by just kind of keeping it to myself. And I think that's probably why I'm here tonight, but that there was this like deep sense of injustice and like a different kind of anger, but motivating anger that also showed up a lot in those first few days.
Yeah, I remember when I joined and I literally tried to get my intake rescheduled, and she was like, no, I think you should definitely start today. Like you can start today. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm starting. And I didn't want to be here because I'm like, I have things to do. I have to pick up my daughter. I have to be with my baby. Like, how am I gonna fit this into my day? And then as I'm thinking back, I'm like, wow, I felt like a koala bear. I felt like a koala bear once I was in the program. And I think once I accepted that I was in the program and just let everything, like you said, like the mask just peel away and really work on myself, I was like, I don't want to leave. Could I just stay? I just want to stay forever because you feel so supported. You feel so, like you said, Paige, like you have a community. You feel like you have people that understand what you're going through, and you don't even have to say anything. They could just look at you and say, are you okay? Like, you're not really talking today. Or I remember someone else told me when I was in the program, once this was probably once I was like a month in, she was like, wow, Janelle, it looks like the fog is starting to clear from you. And I was like, wow. And that's literally how when I'm in a fog, that's how it feels now. Like the fog is clearing. So, yeah. And I had that anger, that motivating anger too, Jessica, where I'm like, yeah, this is horrible. I always think like, can you prevent this? I don't think so, to be honest, because it's also a hormonal imbalance for some. but definitely preparing people should be part of the care, part of when we go to the OBGYN and we're there. Why are they only checking the baby? Like, I understand, but also we are carrying the babies, you know? We need to be okay too, to make sure that everyone else is, or everyone else we have to take care of is okay. The mother, that really stuck with me too. Mothering the mother and making sure the mom is okay. So,
But that feels luxurious
yes, it
to
feels like
what
I was at
Jessica
a
was saying.
spa.
Like, yeah. Like I mean, you know, my whole like, it took me like a week or two to feel like that it was like essential, like it was essential to like my survival. And obviously, I'm very lucky to be able to have been in the program, you know, for financial reasons and everything else. But I was like, I'm not here like for fun, you know, and it's not a spa. And but it did feel like a luxury, like because you know, not everybody has that opportunity, but like there should be.
I had the very opposite experience. When I first got to Motherhood Center, I wanted out and I did everything possible to get out. And I ended up leaving. But I could only leave if I would continue seeing the psychiatrist a certain amount of times per week and the therapist. And I was like, done, out, I'm out. I actually even ended up using an alias because I didn't want anyone to know my name. And I really was like, why am I here? I was very angry. And I was also just like, I had just been hospitalized. I did my time. I'm good. Let's move forward. And clearly I was not well. And I would miss sessions in the first portion. I was there, I think, probably like a handful of weeks. I wouldn't show up for certain things. I acted like I had other stuff going on. And in retrospect, also, I was heavily medicated. So I was really exhausted and sleeping a lot. But flash forward, you know, a couple months later, I ended up having suicidal thoughts, extreme suicidal ideations, and, you know, kind of making a plan. And the motherhood therapist said, you have to come back to the day program. And just sharing with you all, this was during COVID. So the first time I was in the Motherhood Center was virtual. So I wasn't surrounded by people and I could easily turn off my camera and kind of do my own thing. And then I ended up going in person because COVID, we were wearing masks at the time and it was a very different experience. And I promised the team that not, what's the word? Not necessarily succumb, but I
Surrender,
would, what's the word?
surrender.
Surrender. Yes. And take it in. And the second time around was incredibly therapeutic. And, you know, Stephanie, you said a hammock. Janelle, you said community. And actually one of the helpful things that my team had me do was write down my values. And I've shared this with other people, but one of the things that rose to the top was community. And I had a really hard time asking for help and really being vulnerable with people. And I think, you know, the Motherhood Center really taught me that in terms of being vulnerable and building that community. And which is one of the reasons why we ended up moving to Portland, Maine, because community was much more accessible here for us, at least.
You know, one thing I heard a lot of you reference is this sense of injustice, anger. Why isn't anybody talking about this? Why aren't people screening for this? Why wasn't I educated? Why didn't anyone tell me that this was a possibility? And I do fundamentally believe that this is one of those instances where anger can be a very helpful and motivating emotion. And, you know, I speak from experience because anger is one of the things that led me personally to be a part of opening this space so that other women didn't have to struggle like I did. And I want to hear from all of you now, which really is, you know, one of the most important parts of this conversation. If you can identify with that anger or if it was something else that motivated you, how did you use that as a tool to shape the work you're doing now?
Yeah, I remember being in the Motherhood Center and saying to the cohort I was in, like, I remember I was screaming. So I was like, this needs not to happen to other people. Like, don't worry. I'm gonna fight for everyone here, right? And then it was funny when I left or when I was discharged from the Motherhood Center and I was talking, I think I was talking to my therapist at the time. I was like, I would like to be an advocate. Like, I would like to come and speak if there's anyone else going through anything. Like, I wouldn't mind coming back and talking. And then I think I like reached back out maybe a few months later. And it was because I was still angry. I was like, I had to fight to get my paid family leave, first of all. So all this time I took off, you don't want to pay me for it because I didn't break my leg. Because I have a behavioral health diagnosis and you can't fully prove it, you're telling me I can't get paid. That's not fair, you know? So I remember then feeling better and saying, like, I want to be vulnerable with other people. I want to speak about my experience so people know that this isn't like a taboo. This does happen, but it is curable, you know? And so I spoke with I did a New York Times article. I have spoken with the Women's Health magazine. I'm also on the maternal mental health workforce with the state. I'm also a part of Chamber of Mothers. And now I'm opening a business called Gems and I that will also be targeted towards like maternal mental health and women's health, really. So educating and I don't know about providing care yet because I'm not a psychiatrist or a therapist technically, but definitely a space for people to have community and to find their community.
Amazing. Thank you, Janelle. You all have amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to pay it forward, honestly. Like, I am alive because of other moms today. So I just really, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things I can do with my life, but I would really regret it if I didn't at least try to do something for the other moms and give back in some way. So I started a community program. I became a certified mental health peer specialist to the state of New York. And so, peer specialist is someone with lived experience that helps others who are struggling, and they're trained to do that. And it's been a really interesting experience so far. I mean, I've spoken to several moms, and they're not in the PMAD stage. Their kids are 1, 2, 3, and I tell them my story and what I'm doing now, and they've all just started crying in front of me. How they've been struggling, or they struggled when their daughter was 2. And I think that, there's a lack of resources for the PMAD period. There's even less resources for the women who are past the PMAD period, right? And a lot of those moms are struggling and they don't know where to go to. And they think that they either can't afford to go get help or they're too overwhelmed to even try and find to get help. So I created a program called DOA, which comes from the Korean word tojo, which means help. And we provide resources, support, and classes for prenatal, postpartum, and beyond, so that we can help them get the resources and support that they need for mental health. And I think that, mental health is just one aspect of wellness. So we also, we heavily offer education and even like movement, fitness, meditation classes, because we want to really try and support the entire well-being of a mother. And we actually also offer classes for the partner, because if we want mom to be okay, your wife or husband, they need to know what's going on and they need to know how to support you. So we're hoping that by offering resources to them as well, they'll take advantage and they'll be able to support mom at home. But yeah, we just launched. Could burn and fail tomorrow, but I'm okay with that because I know that I tried. Yeah.
I'll piggyback off of that. You gave a good segue into kind of how I landed as well, Stella. But I think one of my biggest learnings when I graduated from the program was that I'd actually been struggling for 5 years. It wasn't actually Miles that sent me there. It was Julian, and that was 5 years earlier. And it was, I think exactly to your point, Stella, like I should know what I was doing by then. I think that was like a constant, like like conversation I was having with myself. And I also didn't think that was fair. And the anger for me was also also a relief, because I think I hadn't, it also relieved a lot of like what being a woman and being angry felt like too, and how that is often, you know, like weaponized and used against people. And I felt like it became a fire instead of like instead of consuming me, I felt like it became like a furnace. And so I remember sitting in my first session, and I don't remember if it was Paige or if it was Meredith, but one of you just started, you asked a question, and I was like, I'm like, I'm going to do that. That's what I'm going to do. And I'd waited my whole life until that moment to sort of like recognize that. And so within a week, I had decided to quit my job. And I was, within a year, I had become a doula, a lactation counselor, a certified childbirth educator, and I was beginning an MSW program at Fordham. And it just completely cracked open purpose. And what was really interesting for me is that in 2000, I guess it was 19, I was at a lecture at the Motherhood Center, and I met a woman who has become my partner, and we opened the Alliance Center in 2021, which is in Stamford, Connecticut. It's a women's health, mental health center. We specialize in supporting people from preconception through parenting. We have programming every day of the week with individual therapy, group therapy, parent coaching, childbirth education, feeding circles, movement, yoga, play groups. We are building out at such a clip that we are just like, we've been able to serve hundreds of women in a really short amount of time. And it is not lost on me that, you know, I needed to like the credentialing part of this also feels like an injustice. It's like I had to just like jump in feet first. And, you know, in hindsight, again, like that's maybe not the healthiest thing, but I knew it was the only way to move the needle. But I am really, really proud of the work we've gotten to do and the people we've gotten to touch. And it really is just a place for gathering. I mean, that was the first word that Carolyn and I said. We were like, we want to gather.
I mean, I'm just in awe of everything that you guys have done. I started advising a maternal mental health startup. So my background is marketing, and I have helped her with social campaigns, securing guests, and through earned media, getting the word out. She has a pretty successful podcast series that talks about PMADs and parenting and overall mental health and overall how to promote well-being for birthing people and parents. And then similar to what I was mentioning to you all, this concept of community and really trying to build that community has been kind of top of mind for me. And so last December, a friend of mine and I launched a women's monthly event series, or as Jessica, you said, gatherings. We call them gatherings. And it's convening women around certain topics. And we design these gatherings. All the gatherings are very different, but it's with human connection and deep connection, forming that and being vulnerable, something that I was not able to do 2.5 years ago. And getting these women to be vulnerable at the beginning of the event, in order to form those deep connections. And, you know, the feedback from these experiences is that women leave saying like, oh my God, I feel like I met my best friend, or I have a new partner and we're going to ideate and, you know, talk about business, or, you know, so-and-so is offering to share their nanny. And it's just like this building of kind of community well-being. It's just the start of it. And then I continue to kind of talk about my experience. Paige has invited me back. And then we just recently launched a maternal mental health campaign with a lot of big partners that one of the components was a video ad that Paige is the voiceover for. And her voice, talk about, Stephanie, a hammock, it cradles you throughout the entire ad.
Thank you, Janine. Stephanie?
So I started my business. It's called Home Mama. And it sort of originated when I never planned this. But I was sitting in the day program and I was sitting in the room with, whoever was facilitating the group at the time and all of the other, all of my peers around me. And I was just like, this is all, I just want to be surrounded. It's like the hammock, I just want to be surrounded by these people like all the time. And I normally, I'm an occupational therapist and I work in orthopedics prior to this. And I was just like, I didn't want to go back to that. I didn't want to go, I didn't think I could go back to school to get, a psychology degree or social work degree. And so what I did is I thought about what I could do as an occupational therapist, and I did a lot of research, and it's a very sort of growing area of occupational therapy where more and more OTs are starting to work in the maternal health space. And in various different specialties. And for me, I'm a certified hand therapist, and I also specialize in ergonomics. So my company, I go into the home to offer support with finding more comfortable positioning for breastfeeding, bottle feeding. If your wrists are killing you, let's figure out, why, how you're holding your baby, what you're doing, that could be better, when you're picking your baby up in and out of the crib, stuff like that. And then I'll also bring rehab to the home. So I have a client right now who she's waited, 4 months until she's about to go back to work, and her wrist has been killing her. And, she found out about me. And so I've been going to her home to do therapy with her. So, I got perinatal mental health certified because this just has been really, so I was in the day program this past summer. And I mean, this all started about 1.5 years ago, my symptoms, and it's really been basically I would say the worst year of my life. And I'm, even as of last Thursday, I have, I guess, what people are calling treatment resistant depression. So I've tried 7, 8, 9 different medications and still kind of get these dips that I don't always know are going to be coming. And, even as of last week, almost my psychiatric nurse practitioner wanted me to potentially check myself into a hospital. But I got through it, and, we're trying to figure out the next route. Yeah, I mean, I think I just felt like I needed this to survive. I needed to the purpose. I needed what I do every day to be linked to this time in my life that I think has changed me, for the rest of my life.
I just the smile on my face listening to all of your stories and what you've done with your own experience, it blows me away. It is so inspiring. It is so courageous. It is so amazing that this was such a life-changing experience for you. And what each one of you are doing is you are creating communities, right? You're creating a hammock, you're creating an experience for someone else to feel like a koala. You are creating the village that we think will be there for us and is not, which is one of the loneliest and most isolating aspects of being a new mother, and being a new mother with a maternal mental health condition. And you are so paying that sense of community forward. And it's what people need to feel seen, understood, heard, and held. And I mean, your accomplishments are so profound and meaningful. And as a last question, before we start to come to an end for this evening, I would ask you, as people with lived experience, as people who have used your own experience and turn it into something so powerful, do you think there's enough being done to address maternal mental health? And if not, what do you think needs to change?
No, no, quite frankly, no. And I think, it takes people who, unfortunately, it takes people who have been in our shoes to start shining the light and to start, making the noise. But it is, yeah, quite simply no. I do feel like there is movement. This week there was a ton of new rollouts when it came to sort of like federal and policy level changes when it comes to maternal mental health. And I think there is a zeitgeist of care in this moment that we are like in, and where that overlaps or that collides with like motherhood, is that, that like we really are the root of everything. And the work we do just like neurologically, biologically all the time is so swift and careful and balanced, and that you there's just this untapped resource of that we can bring forward. And I think that like, it sucks that you have to sort of like seek out these really niche areas, and put effort that way in, because it does take away time that you have for your family, right? Which is like part of this experience was like learning how to be a mother, and now you have to wear the hat of being a mother for everybody, right? But it is a burden I'm willing to bear, and I'm so glad that you are all doing it as well.
Honestly, for me, like everything's just so expensive. Like therapy is so expensive. No one's in network. Like, psychiatry is like what, 30 minutes, like hundreds of dollars. Like that, majority of people cannot afford that, right? So if you can't afford it, you're not going to get the help. I hope that like, there's more people who go in network, or there's something that's more accessible or more group options, because that's generally a little bit cheaper. But like I'm lucky that I can afford, to pay $100-something every week for therapy, or, psychiatry every month or every few months, but most people cannot do that. And it's getting harder now, right? With the economy and everything. So even if people want to get help, they can't, because they can't afford it. So like,
To that,
I don't know, right? There's like multiple barriers to getting help. It's not just about, letting, like having more awareness. I mean, there are people who are aware and they're not getting the help because of cost.
And I want to like add to that too. Like at the center, we take insurance, and we take multiple insurance, and we have medication management available, and we have all of these resources. But the other side of the system break is that nobody knows how to find that either. And then, so you have these universal screening mandates, and then that, someone screens positive and it's like, okay, now what? But like, so it's up to the provider to then build the relationship with the screener so that you can warm hand off this person. And then, so we're here and we have space for you, and we want you to come and want you to find us. But there's just so many layers of barriers, and it's so frustrating, because I think everybody thinks it's not accessible, but actually it is. There is places out there. There are places for you. But who's going to tell you about it, if you are feeling so stuck?
I also
Yeah,
think, so you bring up a great point. I almost wish that there needs to be education with the insurance companies, that if you preemptively screen these women and start taking care of them now, there are cost savings involved. And I mean, sadly, I wish there were more options in like the Motherhood Center in New York if something happens. You know, I'm in Portland, Maine. There is nothing like the Motherhood Center in Portland, Maine. There just isn't. The South, you know, advocating for and helping this woman who's the founder of this maternal mental health company that's online therapy. She's having a really hard time convincing OBs the value behind what she brings and making it cost effective for them. And then the training, educating the nurses and the providers to screen these women and then get them into the program. So it's like systemically, we're not set up correctly. And there's a cost barrier. And there's also culturally such a stigma attached to mothers, you know, not feeling grateful about having a healthy child. So there's so much that needs to be done.
I think also like it's so complex, like from what I've, spoken to my nurse practitioners and everything, each each case of a PMAD might have been, there's just so many different factors that led that person to the place that they got, whether it's hormones, whether it's genetics, whether it's biological factors, whether it's environmental, stigma, where you live, access to resources, all that stuff. But I think that like they're doing, scientists are doing more studies. And so I don't know if like there's more, I guess, evidence for what the etiology of a maternal mental health disorder is. Maybe the insurance companies would be, kind of like they want the evidence, they want the information, because it's hard to like see, because that's a mental health disorder. Yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
even just, it's like even before the woman gets pregnant. I mean, there was research that came out a couple summers ago that women who go through IVF and being pumped with hormones are more likely, more susceptible to PMADs and in particular postpartum psychosis, which is what I had. So it's like even the reproductive endocrinologists need to be educated. It's not just the OBs. So even before that, women who are seeking IVF, especially in the New York City area where there's so many women seeking IVF treatment.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything, Janelle?
Oh, I have so much to say. I don't even know where to start.
That's why I asked.
Because yeah, cost is a factor, stigma is a factor. And and then like with what Stephanie was saying, trying to figure out the cause, right? But I feel like for the cause, I want to know personally, does the cause really matter? Like if a person is exhibiting symptoms that is completely different to who they are usually, isn't that a telltale sign? It's so interesting that you can negate a mental health symptom because you can't physically see it. Like the body shows you warning signs before you even can really exhibit a mental health symptom, you know? And it's just interesting that the insurance companies, which is funny because I also work in insurance, you have to like have proof for everything, but it's just so hard to prove. So even with a cause of etiology, will that make much of a difference? You know, I had to really fight. I don't know if Paige remembers, but I was fighting with my insurance, the people who are paying, even though I paid into it. I had to fight to get my money out. And it's like, do you really want me to use this service then? What am I fighting for short-term disability? What am I paying for short-term disability rather? If when I actually need it, you're telling me, oh, this is hard to prove. How do we know you really need to be in this type of therapy? Oh, you're going virtually? So are you really going? Like, could you imagine having to deal with that and then also having the bills piling up? Don't get me started on the 66.67% that they pay you while you're on leave, but you've had an additional child. how are you cutting my salary and I have more mouths to feed on top of inflation, on top of my bills, on top of everything else? I have to buy diapers, I have to buy wipes, I have to maybe buy formula, I have to buy, if I'm breastfeeding, I have to buy the breast pump sometimes because I have a breast pump, but it might not work for me because everyone's body is different. I'm sorry, I'm talking fast. And then you have like what if you also want to go get your nails done? What if you want to like still live your life? You have to cut back on all of these things because
Close
you have
the
to,
self-care, the mental health away.
yeah, like you have to like, it's just so interesting. It's so interesting. Like I I could go on and on, but I'll stop here. But yeah.
Well, there is clearly a lot that needs to shift and change in the field of maternal mental health. And for all of the things that you all stated, this is the noise. These are the arguments that are being made. This is what policymakers have been tasked with looking at and attempting to solve so that we can make treatment more affordable and accessible to all new and expecting mothers and birthing people that are experiencing PMADs. That is the ultimate goal. And we are not there yet. And also we have come some way. So I do feel hopeful. I feel exceedingly hopeful knowing that people as strong and courageous and intelligent and vulnerable as yourselves that are making a difference and paving the way forward to create innovative programming and services and supports for pregnant and postpartum women and birthing people struggling. This right here is the future of maternal mental health. And I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for your courage and your commitment to serving other mothers and creating the village like each and every one of you are doing. I know that we are putting information in the chat about how everybody in our audience can contact you. I'm thinking of you, Jessica. You're providing this service. Now we just need to make sure that the OBGYNs are referring to you and to everybody for the work that you're doing that is really life-saving. And I also want to thank our audience members for being here tonight, joining the event, being open to learning about PMADs, the lived experience, and how these incredibly brave and courageous women have used their own experience as a tool for change and are really making a difference. This event, again, is recorded. It's going to be available on YouTube next week. Ladies, I cannot thank you enough. Just to the moon and back. Knowing you all as I do, and hearing you show up today and hear all that you've done and how far you've come, this is the best part of my job. So thank you. And I hope you all have a lovely and relaxing long weekend. Same goes for everyone in the audience. And if anybody out there needs some help or support, please know that the Motherhood Center is here for you. If for some reason we're not the right fit, we will deliver you into the right hands. And just thank you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Paige.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Paige.
You as well.
Thank you.